My sister's mother-in-law planned a party at my house without telling me because she knew I'd say no. Christmas had barely made it through appetizers before my sister's mother-in-law called me her future daughter-in-law in front of both families. She said it loudly too, with one hand on my shoulder and the other holding up her phone like she was documenting a royal engagement. My boyfriend and I had been together for a while, but we weren't engaged yet. And even if we had been, there was no universe where marrying him would somehow make me that woman's daughter-in-law. She was my sister's mother-in-law. That was the connection. A distant, awkward little branch on the family tree that should have required labels at large gatherings. I corrected her gently because it was Christmas, and my mother had already spent all morning warning me not to start anything. "I'm not your daughter-in-law," I said with a laugh. "Wrong couple." She smiled at me like I'd made a cute joke. "Not officially." My boyfriend made a face beside me. My sister stared very hard at her plate. Her husband looked exhausted before dinner had even started, which should have told me more than it did. Our parents had known each other for years, and after my sister married into his family, everyone decided it would be easier to combine a few major holidays. Easier is one of those words families use right before making things much harder. My parents liked the idea because nobody had to choose sides. My sister liked it because she didn't have to drag her young daughter between houses. My sister's mother-in-law liked it because she got a bigger audience. Within an hour, she had rearranged the place cards my mother made, moved my father's chair, told my boyfriend where to put his coat, and announced that the children would eat after the adults because that's how civilized families do it. My mother quietly moved the children's plates back. My father quietly moved his chair back. Nobody addressed any of it directly because we were all doing that stupid holiday thing where we pretend silence is peace. Then she started taking pictures. Not normal group pictures either. She kept pulling me next to my boyfriend and saying things like, "My other son and his girl," and "Soon we'll have another wedding." She posted one before I could even ask what she was doing. I only knew because my phone started buzzing in my pocket with messages from people asking if we'd gotten engaged. I asked her to take it down. She blinked. "Why? You both look wonderful." "Because the caption makes it sound like we're engaged and we're not. People understand what I mean. I don't understand what you mean, and I'm in the picture." That was when my sister finally leaned toward me and whispered, "Can you just let it go for tonight? She wants to feel included." I remember looking at her and thinking, included in what? My relationship? My face? My future hypothetical wedding? But my sister had that tight look around her mouth that meant she'd already been managing this woman for hours, maybe days. And I felt guilty. So I stopped. I let the picture stay up, and I told myself I was choosing my sister over a pointless argument. After dessert, my sister's mother-in-law stood beside the fireplace and announced that from then on she would coordinate all major family gatherings because too many people were working without a system. My father actually laughed because he thought she was kidding. She didn't laugh back. On the drive home, my boyfriend asked if she was always like that. "No," I said, which was technically true. I hadn't known her long enough to know what always looked like yet. A few months later, my boyfriend proposed in our kitchen while I was still wearing shelter scrubs and holding a bag of dog food. It wasn't glamorous, but it was perfect for us. He'd hidden the ring inside the cabinet where we kept the coffee, then panicked that I'd somehow miss it and just handed me the box. I cried. He cried. And one of our dogs barked because she thought emotional intensity meant someone was at the door. We called our parents first, then my brother, then my sister. My sister was thrilled. She squealed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. And for about 15 minutes, it felt like we were kids again, whispering under a blanket about what our weddings would look like. She asked about dates, colors, venues, and whether I wanted our niece involved. I told her we hadn't decided anything yet. She said, "We're planning all of it in the family now," in that warm, excited way people speak when they don't realize a sentence is about to become evidence. By the next morning, her mother-in-law had sent me a 7-paragraph message about buffet options. I replied, "Thanks, but we're still figuring things out." She sent chair suggestions. I replied, "We haven't chosen a venue." She sent a list of songs she considered appropriate for family entrances. I ignored that one. Over the next few weeks, she attached herself to our wedding planning like she'd been hired without my knowledge. Every answer I gave became the beginning of a debate. If I said we wanted a small wedding, she said we'd regret excluding people. If I said we didn't want a formal church ceremony, she said my future children would ask why there were no traditional pictures. If I said my best friend was handling the pre-wedding party, she said outsiders shouldn't organize family events. My fiancé, because yes, I started enjoying that word immediately, wanted me to block her. I didn't, mostly because my sister kept apologizing and promising she would calm down. I also didn't want to become the difficult one. That's embarrassing to admit now, but it's true. I was so focused on not looking dramatic that I let someone be dramatic at me for free. The real fight started over my niece. My sister's daughter was sweet, funny, and painfully shy around crowds. She loved our dogs and would sit on the floor brushing them for an hour. But if 3 unfamiliar adults looked at her at the same time, she froze. We asked if she wanted to be in the wedding, and she immediately started crying. Not fake crying, not spoiled crying. Full panic, red face, clinging to my sister's shirt. I told her she didn't have to do anything. My sister agreed. Her mother-in-law did not. She needs to learn confidence, she said at a family lunch. Walking down an aisle will be good for her. My niece was sitting right there, pushing peas around her plate. She doesn't need exposure therapy at my wedding, I said. The woman laughed like I was overreacting. It's a basket of flowers, not military service. My fiancé squeezed my knee under the table because he knew I was about 3 seconds from saying something that would ruin lunch in a satisfying way. We came up with another idea. Our dogs were calm, trained, and honestly more reliable than half the adults involved. So we decided they could walk in with little flower baskets attached to their harnesses. My niece could help get them ready in a quiet room without appearing in front of everyone. She loved the plan. She even drew pictures of the baskets. My sister's mother-in-law acted like we'd replaced a child with livestock. At the next gathering, she announced to a group of relatives, "Apparently dogs are more important than family now." My sister pulled me aside afterward and asked whether I could give the woman one small responsibility. Maybe choosing the table linens or helping with favors. Why? Because she feels shut out. She is shut out. It's not her wedding. My sister's eyes filled with tears so quickly that I hated myself for the bluntness, even though I meant it. She said the woman called her every day to ask what was happening and accused her of hiding things. Her husband didn't want to get involved because he said it would only make his mother more upset. My sister was stuck in the middle. Except she wasn't, not really. She had stepped into the middle and then kept asking me to move so she would have more room. I told her I wouldn't force her daughter into a role she didn't want, and I wouldn't assign a grown woman wedding tasks to regulate her emotions. My sister nodded, but something cooled between us right there beside the restaurant bathroom. It wasn't a dramatic break. It was smaller and worse. The first little shift where she started seeing my boundaries as work she had to do. The pre-wedding party happened in a rented community room above a local cafe, with mismatched chairs, cheap string lights, and way too much food because my mother believed leftovers were a moral success. My best friend organized it. My sister helped decorate. For the first hour, everything was easy. Then her mother-in-law arrived wearing a sparkly dress and carrying her own microphone. I wish that were an exaggeration. She said she thought the room's sound system might be unreliable. My best friend took the microphone from her and put it behind the service counter. The woman laughed, ordered a drink, and spent the next hour becoming louder, warmer, and much more determined to make a speech. Every time someone else stood to say a few words, she moved toward the front. My best friend intercepted her twice. My sister tried once, then gave up after the woman snapped, "I'm allowed to speak about my own family." Eventually, while my best friend was in the bathroom, she found the microphone, walked onto the little platform, and tapped it so hard everyone winced. She started by calling herself my second mother. My actual mother was sitting less than 10 feet away. Then she talked about how she'd always known I would join the family properly, how my fiancé was lucky to be welcomed into such a close circle, and how exciting it would be when the real next generation arrived. She pointed toward my sister's daughter and then toward my stomach. She did not mention my brother's adopted children, who were sitting at a table with coloring books and cupcakes. The room got quiet in that immediate heavy way that means everybody heard the same ugly thing. My best friend came back, crossed the room, and switched off the microphone. "We're done with speeches," she said. The woman kept talking without it. She said people were too sensitive, that she was celebrating biology, that everyone knew what she meant. My brother stood up. His wife put a hand on his arm. My fiancé moved toward me because apparently my face had become alarming. I said, "Get off the stage." She stared at me. "Excuse me? Get off the stage and don't come to my wedding." My sister gasped like I had slapped someone. The woman started yelling that she had been humiliated, but my best friend took her elbow and guided her down with the calm force of someone removing a drunk ant from a karaoke machine. Her husband followed, apologizing to people as he went. My sister ran after them. I ended the night crying in the supply closet because I was furious, embarrassed, and ashamed that my brother's kids had heard any of it. My fiancé sat on an upside-down crate beside me and said, "She's not coming. That's final." I agreed. I also sent my sister 3 angry messages in a row, deleted a 4th, then sent an apology for the tone while still defending every word. Very dignified. Very mature. It was not. The weeks before the wedding were a steady campaign to make me change my mind. My mother said excluding someone from a wedding could damage relationships for years. My father said he supported me, but wondered whether a formal apology might solve it. My sister said her marriage was becoming unbearable because her husband felt forced to choose between me and his mother. Her husband called my fiancé and said his mother had meant well. My fiancé asked him, which part was well meant? The claim that she raised my future wife, or the part where adopted kids apparently don't count. He didn't have an answer. He just said, you know how she is. That phrase nearly made me lose my mind. Everybody knew how she was, yet somehow the only person expected to change was me. I kept the ban. I told the venue she wasn't invited and asked them not to let anyone add guests. I felt mean doing it. I also slept better. Our wedding day was beautiful in the normal, imperfect way real weddings are beautiful. One dog tried to shake off her flower basket halfway down the aisle. My veil caught on a chair. My niece helped with the dogs and watched from the front row without being forced to perform. My brother cried harder than my mother. My husband forgot half his vows and made up the rest. My sister came, but she was distant. She smiled in pictures, danced once, and spent a lot of time checking her phone. During dinner, someone showed me a vague post from her mother-in-law about being excluded from a major family moment by people who confused cruelty with boundaries. I put my phone face down. I didn't respond. That should have felt like winning, but it didn't. The next morning, my sister left before breakfast at the hotel. She hugged me quickly and said she was tired. We didn't fight. We didn't need to. The coldness had settled in between us, and both of us knew where it came from. A few months after the wedding, my husband and I moved into a small house near the edge of town. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen cabinets were older than both of us. One bathroom tile was permanently cracked, and the yard looked like somebody had abandoned a dirt project halfway through. We loved it anyway. My husband's mother knew a lot about gardening and helped us plan the yard. She wasn't pushy. She asked what we wanted, showed us which plants were safe around dogs, and helped install a simple irrigation line while the final exterior work was still being finished. I remember thinking this was what help was supposed to feel like. Useful, respectful, and strangely unremarkable. That summer, the shelter network where I worked sent me to a regional training for a few days. I told my parents and my sister because my sister was going to check on our mother after a minor dental procedure. I didn't think mentioning a work trip counted as sensitive information. When I came home, part of my new garden was gone. At first, I thought the contractor had made a mistake. Then I saw neat rows of bright decorative flowers where the dog-safe plants had been. The irrigation tubing was pulled loose and bent around them. One of our dogs was sniffing near a broken leaf. I dropped my bag and ran outside so fast I left the front door open. My husband came home 20 minutes later and found me kneeling in the dirt, ripping out plants with my bare hands. I knew enough from work to recognize that some could make dogs seriously sick. Maybe not from one sniff, maybe not even from a small bite, but I wasn't taking chances. He called the contractor. The contractor said a woman had come by claiming she was family and that I wanted the front bed redone before I returned. The workers had seen her at the property once before with my sister, so nobody questioned her. She had brought the plants, directed where they should go, and left before lunch. My husband didn't need to ask who. I called my sister. She went silent when I told her. Then she said, I might have mentioned you were away. I didn't tell her to go there. How did she know I'd be away and the contractors would be at the house? Another silence. Apparently my sister had mentioned my trip, the exterior work schedule, and how excited we were about the garden. Her mother-in-law had complained that my husband's mother was taking over and said she should do something thoughtful too. My sister thought it was talk. She always thought it was talk until it became my problem. The woman denied knowing the flowers were unsafe. She said she wanted to surprise us and make the yard look finished. She said the original plants were plain. She said the workers should have protected the irrigation line. She said gratitude would be a more appropriate response than anger. Her husband came by 2 days later with an envelope to cover the replacement costs. He stood on our porch looking older than I remembered and said, "She gets carried away." I asked whether he had told her she couldn't enter other people's property and tear things out. He looked at the ground. Talking to her right now won't help. Of course it wouldn't. Talking to her never helped. So everyone just talked to me instead. I accepted the money because we needed it, then told him she was not allowed on our property again for any reason. I sent the same message in writing to my sister and her husband. My husband changed the gate latch and spoke to the contractor. For weeks, I couldn't look at the front yard without feeling invaded. It wasn't about flowers. It was the fact that she had heard I was gone and treated my absence like permission. Worse, my sister had supplied the opening without even thinking about what might happen. I stopped telling my sister small things after that. I didn't announce the decision, I just edited myself. Work was fine. Weekends were busy. The house was coming along. It felt awful because we'd always told each other everything, but I couldn't keep handing her pieces of my life and hoping they wouldn't be passed along. By early fall, my parents wanted everyone together for a family cookout at our house. I agreed on one condition. My sister's mother-in-law wasn't invited. Nobody argued with me directly, which should have been suspicious. A week before the cookout, the woman began sharing articles about dog attacks on a social media app. Not one article, not two. A whole parade of blurry headlines and dramatic captions about children being unsafe around animals. She tagged relatives. She sent one directly to my sister's husband. She posted that responsible adults shouldn't value pets more than human family. Our dogs had never bitten anyone. They were trained, supervised, and used to children because I worked with animals for a living and wasn't an idiot. Still, my sister's husband called and asked whether we could lock them in a bedroom for the entire visit. They live here, I said. My daughter is coming. Your daughter knows them. She brushes them every time she's here. He lowered his voice. My mother is worried. Your mother isn't coming. That was the point. Of course. His mother couldn't attend, so she was going to control the gathering from somewhere else. I offered a reasonable plan because I didn't want my niece caught in adult nonsense. The dogs would stay behind a gate when guests arrived, then come out one at a time, leashed while I supervised. My niece could choose whether to interact. If she seemed uncomfortable, we'd separate them. It was more caution than we normally needed, but fine. The cookout went perfectly. My niece ran into the yard, asked for the dogs, and spent half the afternoon throwing a soft toy until my husband begged her to let his arm recover. Nobody was knocked over. Nobody was growled at. The most dangerous moment was my father nearly dropping a tray of food because he refused help. My sister's husband remained tense anyway. Every time a dog moved, his shoulders lifted. I finally asked whether he was actually afraid or just waiting for something to happen so his mother could be right. He told me not to make everything about her. I laughed because sometimes the only alternatives are laughing or screaming, and we had guests. A few weeks later, my sister called me late at night. She sounded guilty before she said anything. She had overheard her mother-in-law on the phone with a relative, bragging that maybe I would finally understand I couldn't exclude family and expect everyone else to cooperate. The dog posts had never been about safety. They were punishment. When did you hear that? I asked. She hesitated. A while ago. How long is a while? A couple weeks. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the laundry basket I had been pretending I would fold. So you knew during the cookout. I didn't want to start another fight. You let me think your husband genuinely believed my dogs were dangerous. He was worried too. Because she made him worried. My sister started crying. She said she was tired. She said every conversation became a crisis. She said if she told me everything her mother-in-law said, we'd never speak to anyone again. I wanted to comfort her because she was my sister and because I could hear how trapped she felt. I also wanted to throw my phone through the wall. Both feelings were real, which became the main problem between us. Her pain was real, but she kept using my privacy, my home, and my relationships as padding around it. The next major blow-up happened at my niece's birthday party at our parents' house. My mother had decorated the backyard with paper flowers, my father was grilling, and every child under 10 was sticky within 20 minutes. My brother and his wife brought their adopted children, who were old enough to understand tone even when adults believed they weren't listening. My sister's mother-in-law arrived carrying a huge gift and acting like the previous year had been a misunderstanding. Everyone else should have gotten over. Since it was my parents' home, I didn't control the guest list. I told myself I could be civil for my niece. For most of the afternoon, I stayed away from her. Then my husband came across the yard with a look I recognized immediately. His jaw was tight and one of my brother's children was walking behind him, confused and close to tears. He asked the woman loudly, "Would you like to repeat what you just said?" Every nearby conversation stopped. She had been talking with two older relatives near the dessert table. According to my husband, she said my brother's children weren't my parents' real grandchildren because they didn't share the family's blood. She had said it while one of the children was standing close enough to hear. The woman waved a hand. "That isn't what I meant." "Then explain what you meant," I said. She looked annoyed, not ashamed. There's a difference between love and lineage. People are allowed to acknowledge biology. My brother had reached us by then. His wife took their child inside. My brother didn't yell. That was worse. He just stared at the woman like she had become something small and filthy. "You call them your grandchildren when you're posting pictures," he said. She replied, "I call all the children that because families use affectionate language." My husband said, "So they're family when it makes you look warm, but not when you're discussing who counts?" I told her to leave. My sister immediately stepped between us. "This is Mom and Dad's house. You can't throw people out." I'm asking her to leave after she insulted our brother's children. "You're making a scene in front of everyone." I turned to my father. "Are you going to let her stay?" My father looked miserable, but he put down the grilling tongs and said, "You need to go." The woman started crying. Real tears this time, or at least wet ones. She said she was being attacked for using an ordinary word. She tried explaining that children naturally resemble their biological families, which somehow made everything worse. 2 cousins called her prejudiced. My mother took the birthday girl inside before she could hear more. My sister's husband finally led his mother toward the driveway. My sister stayed behind and hissed, "You pushed Dad into humiliating her." I stared at her. She told a child he wasn't a real grandchild. She shouldn't have said it. But you always go straight to the maximum response. That sentence ended something in me. My brother cut contact with the woman after that. His wife made it clear they wouldn't attend any gathering where she was present. Nobody blamed them. Somehow, though, my sister still treated me like I had caused the family split by refusing to absorb the insult quietly. We barely spoke for a month. During that time, my sister was dealing with work stress, childcare problems, and constant arguments at home. I knew because my mother told me, even though I had asked her not to carry messages between us. I felt bad. I missed my sister. I also knew that reaching out too quickly would teach everyone the same lesson again. Hurt me? Wait. And eventually I'll return because I can't stand the distance. Then I made the mistake of trying to be kind in a way that involved logistics. A local wellness center offered individual relaxation packages that included a massage, a private soaking room, and lunch. I bought one for my mother, one for my husband's mother, and one for my sister. Each package was registered to the person's name and health information because the center screened for certain conditions. It wasn't a group outing. I chose separate dates so nobody would have to perform family harmony in a robe. My sister cried when I gave her the envelope. She said she needed it more than I knew. For a moment, I thought we were repairing something. Her mother-in-law found out about the gifts and called me that evening. "I heard the mothers are having a spa day," she said. "They aren't. I bought 3 individual packages." "And you didn't think to include me?" "No." She laughed sharply. "At least you're honest. You aren't my mother." "I'm your sister's mother. You're my sister's mother-in-law." There was a pause. Then she said I was obsessed with technicalities. I told her family relationships were, in fact, technical enough to have words. After that, she called my sister repeatedly. I didn't know about the calls until the day of my sister's appointment, when the wellness center phoned me because a woman was at the front desk demanding to use a package that wasn't in her name. I thought they had the wrong number. They did not. My sister had told her mother-in-law she could take the appointment. She hadn't asked me. She hadn't checked the policy. She had simply handed over the information because the woman wouldn't stop pressuring her. The center refused the transfer. The woman raised her voice, accused the staff of discrimination, and demanded a manager. She was eventually asked to leave. No police, no dramatic removal, just a humiliating little scene in a quiet lobby where people were trying to relax. I called my sister as soon as I hung up. "Why would you give her your gift? She wanted to go, and I don't have the energy to fight about every little thing." "It wasn't a little thing to me. I bought it for you." "I know, and I'm grateful." "You gave it away." She snapped, because saying yes to her once would have saved me days of calls. "So you made her my problem. Again. You don't understand what it's like." "You're right. I don't understand volunteering someone else's money, plan, and name because you don't want to hear your phone ring." She hung up on me. I called back. She rejected the call. I sent a message saying I wouldn't arrange gifts, visits, reservations, or plans for her if they could be redirected to her mother-in-law. She replied that I was punishing her for being overwhelmed. Maybe I was. I still don't know. I wasn't trying to hurt her, but I was absolutely trying to stop being the easiest person to disappoint. Several weeks passed before we met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. We sat in a corner because my sister didn't want anyone she knew to overhear us. She looked exhausted. I looked angry because I had practiced being calm in the car and lost the skill when I saw her. She admitted her mother-in-law pressured her constantly. The woman asked where I was, what I was doing, whether my husband and I were trying for children, what holidays we were planning, what my parents said about her, whether my brother had softened. If my sister refused to answer, The woman accused her of joining a campaign to erase her from the family. Then her husband would come home already upset because his mother had called him crying. He tells me to just answer her, my sister said. He says small details don't matter. They matter when she uses them. I know. Do you? That hurt her. I saw it. I said it anyway. We talked for nearly 2 hours. For the first time, my sister didn't defend the woman. She didn't say she meant well or wanted to belong. She said the pressure was damaging her marriage and making her anxious every time her phone lit up. She also admitted she had been sacrificing my comfort because she trusted me to recover, while she didn't trust her mother-in-law to stop escalating. That was the most honest thing she had ever said about the situation. I told her we could try again, but I needed one clear rule. She could not share information about my routine. Travel, health, appointments, home, or plans. Not small details, not harmless details. Nothing. She agreed immediately. Her husband joined us near the end. He said he knew his mother was difficult and admitted he often pushed my sister to keep her calm because confronting her felt impossible. My husband later called that confession a promising first step, which was generous. I called it a grown man finally noticing the human shield he'd been using. Still, the truce seemed real. My sister and I started talking more. We took our niece to a park. She came over for dinner without announcing it to anyone else. A few family events happened without drama because invitations were kept separate. I began relaxing. I didn't trust the peace completely. My sister had admitted the pattern before, but never with this much clarity. I wanted to believe clarity would turn into change. Maybe that was hopeful. Maybe it was naive. Usually it's both. The next problem started after a minor outpatient procedure. I had a small cyst removed from my side, nothing dangerous, but the incision was sore and I was taking medication that couldn't be mixed with alcohol. At a Saturday dinner at my parents' house, where my sister and her mother-in-law were also present, I skipped wine, avoided a couple of foods that upset my stomach, and wore a loose sweater because the waistband of my jeans rubbed the bandage. My brother, his wife, and their children were not there. They were still maintaining the no-contact boundary they had set after the birthday incident. My sister's mother-in-law mostly ignored me, which felt like a gift. Apparently, she noticed everything. By Sunday afternoon, 2 relatives had messaged my mother asking whether I was pregnant. By Monday, the woman posted a vague comment about families growing in unexpected ways. By Wednesday, a distant aunt called me and said she was praying for healthy news. I laughed because I genuinely thought she had confused me with someone else. Then a tiny knitted hat arrived in the mail. I opened the package in my kitchen and just stood there holding it. My husband asked whether somebody we knew had a baby. I said, "Apparently we do." More messages followed. People asked how far along I was. Someone asked whether the wedding dogs had prepared me for motherhood, which was such a strange sentence that I stared at it for a full minute. I called my mother. She sounded embarrassed and said people were making assumptions because I hadn't been drinking. Then, almost casually, she mentioned that my sister had told her mother-in-law I was taking medication after a procedure. Everything in me went still. I posted one message in the family group. I was not pregnant. I had not made any announcement, and nobody should share or speculate about my health. Any future information about my life would come directly from me. The woman replied with a heart and wrote, "We're all just excited for you whenever the time comes." I deleted 3 responses before choosing silence. Then I called my sister. She answered on the 4th ring and already sounded defensive. I asked one question. "Did you tell her about my medication?" She tried to explain before answering, which was an answer by itself. She said her mother-in-law had asked why I wasn't drinking. She said she only mentioned a procedure because she wanted to stop the pregnancy talk. She said she hadn't expected the woman to repeat it. "You promised me," I said. "I know. No health information, no schedule, no details. You promised." She kept asking, and I thought if I gave her the real reason, she'd drop it. I laughed, but it came out ugly. When has giving her information ever made her drop anything? My sister began crying. She told me the pressure had never stopped after our conversation. Her mother-in-law still called daily. Her husband still asked her to answer a few questions so his mother wouldn't spiral. The difference was that my sister had gotten better at hiding it from me. That sentence crushed whatever hope I had built around the truce. "You knew exactly what you promised," I said. "You still kept handing her pieces of my life because exposing me was easier than saying no to her. That's not fair." "It is fair. It's just not kind." She told me I had no idea what her home life was like. I told her she had no idea what it felt like to wonder whether every private conversation would become family entertainment. She said I made mistakes too. I said I had never announced a medical rumor about her, redesigned her property, or volunteered her home for somebody else's emotional needs. Then she said, "You always think your boundaries are more important than everyone else's peace." I went quiet. That was the whole issue. Finally spoken out loud. Peace meant the woman wasn't screaming. Peace meant my sister's husband didn't have to confront his mother. Peace meant my parents didn't have to choose a guest list. Peace meant I absorbed the invasion and kept my reaction quiet enough that other people could enjoy dinner. "Then you can have peace without me," I said. I hung up and blocked her for the night. Not forever, just the night, because I knew she would keep calling and I was afraid I would say something I couldn't take back. Then I sat in my car in the driveway and cried until the porch light came on. My husband opened the passenger door and climbed in without asking me to move. I showed him the messages and the tiny knitted hat still sitting in the cup holder, because apparently I had carried it outside like evidence. He said, "Maybe you need to stop waiting for her to become brave at your expense." I hated that he was right. For the next few months, my sister and I spoke only when necessary. We exchanged information about our parents. I sent my niece a birthday gift directly. At family gatherings, we were polite and careful. My mother kept saying this couldn't continue forever. I told her it could continue exactly as long as nobody changed the behavior that caused it. My sister's marriage also started showing strain. I learned that indirectly, mostly because her husband called mine once to complain that family events had become impossible. My husband told him, "They became impossible when you made your wife responsible for managing your mother." That conversation ended quickly. I didn't enjoy any of it. That's important. I wasn't sitting in my quiet house feeling victorious. I missed my sister so much that sometimes I'd open our old message thread and scroll through years of stupid jokes, recipes, pictures of our niece, and complaints about our mother buying decorative pillows. Then I'd reach the recent messages and feel angry all over again. I also felt guilty because my sister really was under pressure. Her mother-in-law was relentless, and her husband had spent years refusing to protect her from it. But sympathy didn't erase consequence. I could understand why she betrayed my trust, and still refused to keep trusting her. Winter approached, and I assumed the holidays would be awkward but manageable. Then a distant aunt sent me a message asking what she should bring to the end-of-year gathering at our house. I thought she meant some other gathering. "What gathering?" I asked. She sent me a digital invitation. At the top, in cheerful lettering, it said, "A family holiday at Kala's home." Kala is my name, by the way, which made seeing it on an invitation I hadn't created feel even more invasive. Beneath the title was an old photo of my husband and me standing in front of our house. Our address appeared at the bottom, along with a start time, a suggested dress code, and a request that guests bring a favorite dish. The host line listed my sister's mother-in-law. For a few seconds, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. My brain kept searching for the reasonable explanation and returning nothing. Then I called my husband at work and asked whether he had agreed to host a holiday party without telling me. He said, "What?" I forwarded the invitation. His response was just, "No, absolutely not." I contacted my parents. They had received it and assumed I knew because the woman had organized large family events before. My mother admitted she thought it was strange but didn't want to offend me by questioning my plans. My father said he had already told 2 relatives he would help set up tables. I spent the next hour contacting everyone whose name I could get. I told them the event was not authorized, would not happen at our home, and had been announced without our knowledge. Most people were embarrassed. A few thought there had been a misunderstanding. One relative asked whether we could just keep the event since people had already saved the date. I said no, so quickly she stopped talking. Then I called my sister and her husband together. I didn't want separate stories. My sister sounded horrified. Her husband sounded tired in a way that suggested he wasn't surprised. He said his mother had mentioned wanting to bring everyone together, but had never said she planned to use our house. My sister swore she hadn't shared the address recently, though the woman already knew it from the garden incident. Neither of them had seen the invitation. "She used a photo of us," I said. "She told people we agreed." My sister whispered, "Oh my God." Her husband tried saying his mother probably believed she was helping after all the conflict. My husband, who was standing beside me, leaned toward the phone and said, "Do not explain her motive. Deal with her action." There was a long silence. Then my sister's husband said, "You're right." It was the first time I'd heard him say those words without attaching a defense afterward. He called his mother while we stayed on the line. He put the call on speaker. She answered brightly and immediately began talking about table rentals. He interrupted her. "The event is canceled," he said. "You don't have permission to host anything at their house." She acted confused. She said she had been told the family needed neutral ground. "Their house isn't neutral ground," he said. She said everyone loved the idea. She said she had only used a photo already available online. She said my husband and I had complained about family separation, which was not true. Then she said, I was trying to give Kala a chance to repair what she broke. I made a sound before I could stop myself. My sister spoke next. Her voice shook, but she said, You announced a party at her house without asking. The woman replied, I knew she'd say no if I asked first. There it was. No misunderstanding. No confusion. She knew the answer. So she tried to create enough social pressure that changing it would be harder than surrendering. My sister's husband told her she could not use our address, our names, or our photo. He told her to send a cancellation to everyone she had invited. She began crying and accused him of choosing my family over his own mother. He said, This isn't about choosing families. You can't volunteer someone else's home. She hung up. I waited for the familiar collapse, the moment when he would ask us to compromise because she was upset. It didn't come. A few days later, my parents invited the immediate adults to their house to decide what to do about the holidays. That meant my parents, my sister and her husband, my husband and me, and the woman who had created the invitation. My brother and his wife declined because they weren't willing to be around her. I respected that and envied it. Before we went, my husband asked whether I wanted to skip the meeting. I said no, partly because I wanted clarity, partly because I was angry, and partly because some immature part of me wanted to watch other people finally tell the truth. I'm not proud of that last reason, but I'm also not going to pretend it wasn't there. The woman arrived carrying a pie. She placed it on my mother's counter and acted as if we were all gathered for a normal dinner. She complimented the decorations, asked about my father's back, and avoided looking at me. Nobody touched the pie. Once we sat down, my father explained that the family could no longer keep combining every celebration. He said people had different limits, and that forcing everyone into one room was creating more harm than separate plans would. The woman immediately blamed me. She said I had excluded her from my wedding, turned the family against her over a misunderstood comment, refused to share gifts, and now canceled a gathering she had organized out of love. She said I had spent years punishing her for trying to belong. I let her finish, which may have been the most self-control I've ever shown. Then I said, You entered my property while I was away and changed my garden. You spread a pregnancy rumor using private medical information. You announced a party at my house because you knew I'd say no if you asked. Those aren't attempts to belong. Those are decisions to ignore me. She said I was twisting everything. My mother opened her mouth, probably to soften the conversation, but my father gently covered her hand with his on the table. It wasn't an attempt to silence her. It was a quiet reminder that smoothing things over had become part of the problem. My sister looked at her husband. He nodded once. Then my sister said, You announced a party at her house without permission. That isn't bringing the family together. The woman stared at her. After everything I've done for you? My sister's face changed. I saw the old fear rise, the instinct to apologize, explain, and offer something. She gripped the edge of her chair. This isn't about everything, she said. It's about what you did. Her husband spoke next. He told his mother she would no longer receive information about my life through them. He said she could not represent him or my sister in invitations, plans, or family decisions. He also said they would leave any conversation where she insulted my brother's children or treated them as less real. The woman turned to him and asked whether his wife had forced him to say that. He said, No, I should have said it years ago. That was the moment the room truly shifted. She stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. She said nobody respected her. Nobody appreciated how much work she had done to keep the family connected, and everybody would regret pushing her away when she was gone. Then she took her coat and left before dinner. The pie stayed on the counter. Nobody celebrated. My sister cried in the bathroom. Her husband sat at the table with both hands over his face. My mother wrapped the pie and put it in the refrigerator because apparently emotional collapse still requires proper food storage. We agreed on separate holidays. My sister and her family would spend part of the actual holiday with her husband's mother. On another day, they would visit us with our parents, my husband's parents, my brother, and his wife. Nobody would pressure my brother's family to attend anything involving the woman. Nobody would carry messages between separate gatherings. It sounded simple because boundaries often sound simple when written in one sentence. Living them was harder. The woman called relatives. She posted vague complaints. She told people I had broken the family because I couldn't forgive one mistake, which was impressive considering she could never identify which single mistake she meant. A few relatives contacted my mother and suggested another meeting. My father told them the decision had been made. My sister's husband handled most of the direct calls from his mother. At first, he complained about the stress. My sister told him, apparently, that she had been carrying that stress for years and was done doing it alone. They argued, they started counseling. I only knew the broad version because my sister was careful not to make me responsible for processing every detail. That care mattered. The first separate holiday felt weird. My sister arrived at our house with her daughter and a casserole. She looked tired but calm. Her phone buzzed twice during dinner. She glanced at it, turned it face down, and kept talking. I didn't ask who it was. Our niece played with the dogs in the living room. My brother's children joined her. My husband's mother brought a plant for the kitchen and asked where I wanted it before setting it down, which nearly made me laugh from the contrast. Later, my sister helped me wash dishes. We stood shoulder to shoulder in the kitchen like we had 1,000 times before. She said, "I'm sorry, not just for telling her things. I'm sorry I kept making your reaction the problem because I couldn't handle hers." I wanted that apology for years. When it finally came, it didn't erase everything. It didn't rebuild trust in one warm movie scene. I just nodded and said, "Thank you." She asked whether we would ever be close again. I said, "I hope so, but I need to see the change for longer than one holiday." She looked hurt, then said, "That's fair." That answer gave me more hope than the apology. Over the next several months, the change held. My sister stopped sharing information. She didn't announce every time she refused a question or resisted pressure. She just did it. Her husband dealt with his mother directly instead of making my sister deliver messages. My parents stopped arranging surprise encounters. My brother's family relaxed enough to attend events again because the guest lists were clear. The woman never apologized to me. For a while, I kept waiting for one because I thought closure required acknowledgement. Eventually, I realized an apology from her would probably become another negotiation about intent. I stopped needing it. That doesn't mean I stopped being angry. Sometimes I still saw the empty patch in old garden photos and felt my chest tighten. Sometimes a relative asked whether all that family drama had settled down, and I had to resist explaining that drama isn't weather. It doesn't roll in by itself. People make choices. Then other people call the consequences a storm. A full year passed before I trusted the new arrangement enough to stop bracing for collapse. On the next holiday weekend, my sister called and said she and her daughter would come by in the afternoon. Before I could ask anything, she added, "I didn't tell her the day, the time, or who will be there. She knows we're doing separate plans and that's all." It was such a small sentence. No speech, no demand for praise. Just proof that she understood the assignment now. When they arrived, our niece ran straight to the backyard. The dogs followed her, older and slower but still thrilled by attention. My parents came later. My husband's parents brought food. My brother and his wife arrived with their children, who scattered into the yard with the easy confidence of kids who no longer expected an adult to debate whether they belonged. The afternoon was normal. Honestly, almost boring. We ate too much, argued about whether my father had overcooked something, and laughed when one of the dogs stole a napkin and immediately regretted the attention. Nobody watched the driveway. Nobody whispered about who might show up. Nobody checked the locks. At some point, my phone buzzed. The woman had posted an old family photo with a caption about people abandoning those who loved them most. A year earlier, I would have taken a screenshot, sent it to my sister, drafted a response, deleted it, drafted another, and spent the rest of the day furious. This time, I looked at the post for maybe 5 seconds. My sister noticed. She didn't ask to see it. She just slid a plate toward me and said the food was getting cold. I put my phone away. That was our peace in the end. Not forgiveness. Not a perfect reunion. Not everyone sitting around one table pretending the past had been a misunderstanding. It was separate plans. Less information. Doors that stayed closed unless we opened them. And a sister who finally understood that keeping the peace shouldn't require offering me up as payment. Outside, my niece was showing my brother's children how to hide treats for the dogs. My husband was arguing with my father about the grill. My mother was packing leftovers before anyone had officially finished eating. Life kept moving in its ordinary, messy way. The woman could post whatever she wanted. She could call herself abandoned, misunderstood, excluded, or unappreciated. For once, her version of the family didn't determine what happened inside my house. I went back to the table before the food got cold.